All right, welcome to Flippin' Rich, Pete. Today we're going to talk to you about, we're going to talk about flipping houses and taking an actual, something we have under contract and taking it all the way to closing, right?
You mean it's not like see deal, do deal?
No, not see deal. Yeah, it's definitely not see deal, do deal. But I tell you, what I love about this is the money that you can make on a flip. But let me tell you, the mistakes can be huge. And there's just some things that you can't avoid when you're working on a flip. So let's walk through an actual deal, okay? We'll give some different examples. So, okay, from the inception of when you're getting it under contract, right? So we've got it under contract. How many inspection days on the contract would you like to see in a perfect world?
Well, look, the bottom line is this. We know that the longer you have a chance to close a deal, the better of a chance you're going to close the deal. I mean, that's just reality. Having said that, it's all about the gray areas in real estate, right? Because if you take it too far, then it's going to be harder to get that deal under contract. And, the seller. So I always say in the perfect case scenario, if you can get somewhere between like 2 weeks to maybe 4 weeks, that should be enough for you to do what needs to be done. But most importantly, this is the thing, this is where I lost it all when I got started a couple decades ago. I didn't double check anything, right? So like somebody would tell me something, I would just go with it. So the more time you give yourself, it's not only that you have enough time to do everything, you have enough time to verify everything and check with other sources also. Gotcha.
So verifying. So inside of this inspection period, I mean, let's talk about some things that need to happen, right? So first thing is getting your numbers right. You know what I mean? Because there's so many opinions. Really, an after repair value or an ARV is really an opinion, right?
Sure is.
So how do you go about getting an opinion from an individual or wherever you're getting them from?
Sure.
How do you even go about getting that ARV?
Well, so here's the thing. The newer you're in this business, the more of opinion you need, right? The more you've done this business, like for instance, us here in Atlanta, right? We've been doing this thing for decades here in Atlanta, right? We got a deal, we call Ivan. Ivan's been with us for 8 years. He tells us, hey, it's a $200,000 property. We don't have to call 4 or 5 other agents. On the other side, when we got started in real estate here in Atlanta, we had to get multiple opinions. So the newer you are, the more opinions you have to get. I always say, and by the way, this is like if we go into a new market, right? If we're starting out with a brand new partner in a market, I say 3 separate opinions. Now here's the other thing that's very important. This is the other thing where I lost a lot of money in this business. Don't get your opinions from whoever brings you that deal, right?
So wait a second. So let's say, so you're saying don't get it to who brings you the deal. So if a realtor brought you the deal and said, okay, this thing's going to be, the ARV's 400, you wouldn't really trust or you might trust them, but you wouldn't go, that wouldn't be your only decision.
Well, let's face it. If a realtor brings you the deal, they're going to make money on that deal. Does that mean they're going to give you bad information? Not necessarily. But that also might mean the opposite. They could potentially give you bad information. So what I always tell people, until you really have a relationship with someone, until you really have a track record with someone, don't get your numbers from the seller, right? Because the seller wants to sell you the property, right? And don't get your opinion. And it's not just from a realtor. Sometimes you can get a deal from a wholesaler. Sometimes an attorney calls you out of the blue and says, hey, I got a deal that I found out about it.
Oh, like a probate attorney?
A probate attorney. Could be a closing attorney. That deal fell apart. Don't get your numbers from whoever brings you the deal. And the newer you are, the more opinions you want. And I always say get at least 3. And by the way, I always say get 3 verifications, not just from the numbers on the value of the deal, 3 contractors and stuff like that.
Yeah, gotcha. So, all right, so we've got the numbers verified.
Yep.
Right? Well, I mean, I want to stick on the ARV for just a second here.
Okay.
Like one thing that I do, even when I get comps from somebody, I always verify them on my own too.
Yep.
I mean, I trust them, right? So if I'm getting comps, I want to make sure that the comparables are the same bedrooms and bathrooms.
Yep.
Similar square footage, at least within a couple hundred square foot.
Yep.
You want the same type of house.
Yep.
So like a stucco house doesn't comp with a brick house.
Yep.
A brick house doesn't comp with a hardy plank siding or a vinyl siding home.
Yep.
Ideally, I want same number of beds and baths if
Yep.
possible, similar square footage, same property type,
Yep.
even acreage. I mean, you could be on a half an acre and 10 acres. There's a huge difference there. Two, you really want to make sure that you're looking at same neighborhood, because we've messed up like this. Remember that house in Florida where we lost $125,000 on it? But yeah, we lost $125,000 on a house in Jacksonville, Florida because of comps. And I'll tell you why. We got comps, and literally the comps were different street by street, weren't they?
Yep. Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Well, and that's easy to do. That's very easy to do. Now, having said that, I always tell people don't go overboard. What I mean by that is this. Before we started partnering with people, we used to start out by just comping off Zillow, right?
Yeah.
And comping off stuff that you can get on the internet. The key is exactly what you said. If you're going to start out your deal comping off the internet, the key is just make sure you configure it correctly, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes people say, well, you can't comp off the internet. Like, how can I comp off Zillow? Well, if you don't configure Zillow the right way, you're right. It's going to pull everything, right? It's going to pull commercial stuff, all this stuff. But if you configure it, same bed, same bath, close to square footage, obviously the radius, stay in the same subdivision, that's a good starting point. Mm-hmm. Having said that, there are some absolute red flags to look out for. I'm going to tell you a story.
Yeah.
So I got started in this business, and I took a whopple, just destroyed in this business. Lost everything I had several months into this business, and I don't know why, but I bought 6 properties. I don't know why, but I still remember my realtor how he comped one of them, because that was a big. This is to what you said, make sure you know how to comp it correctly in terms of areas. I still remember we were somewhere in Atlanta, right? Ponce Avenue. And he literally showed me the house, and he said, okay, this house is worth $400,000, right? And we literally went 3 blocks down the road, but Atlanta, right? Things change very quickly. Mm-hmm. And this was back then there were little subdivisions, and we went outside that subdivision. So some of the big red flags, if you're going to be inside a subdivision, you got to stay inside that subdivision. That one little just leaving the subdivision and going across the street, I can't remember how much, but that deal probably cost me I lost $500,000. That deal probably in itself cost me about $40,000 to $60,000 just by going outside the subdivision and going just a couple blocks down the road. So there are some big no-nos, but having said that, when you're getting your numbers, I think it's totally fine, as long as you know how to configure things correctly, to start on the internet.
Yeah.
And then just kind of work your way back from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so now we've got we're still in the inspection period.
Yep.
We've figured out the ARV. Next, I kind of want to get a roundabout idea of what the rehab's going to be, right? I actually do not get a full complete bid until after I've had a property inspection, because and I mean, when someone's coming to give a bid,
right,
they don't always see everything that the inspector sees. But this is one thing I always say: you always fix what's wrong before you fix what's ugly. Mm-hmm. And why is that? I mean, because when you go to sell it, what happens? Well,
look, there are certain things that are going to kill the deal in the back end.
Yeah.
And when you're saying fix what's wrong instead of what's ugly, you might not paint it perfectly, but if you don't fix the AC, guess what? You're in trouble. You don't fix the heat and air, you're in trouble.
The roof is
You
bad.
don't repair the roof, you're in trouble. So that's exactly right. But this is another very important point. To what level do you do things at? Because one of the things that's important that you guys are going to realize as you start doing fix and flips, time is of the essence.
Oh, yeah.
Time is very important. And I've seen people spend an inordinate amount of time getting the perfect everything, right? Like getting the perfect rehab, to the dollar. And I'm like, why are you getting this thing to the dollar? Most contractors, well, you know this.
Or
You're
try to
married.
save $100.
Well, and you know,
Yeah.
you know how contractors work. Most contractors can go inside a house and within 10 minutes give you at least a ballpark.
Yeah.
Give you at least a ballpark to know if this deal worth moving forward to, or is this deal not worth moving to.
Yeah.
So you're right. In the beginning on the rehab, I'm going to get a general number of what this thing is, because what I'm looking for is I'm looking for things that'll kill the deal.
Yeah.
Right? Like if I'm buying a house and I'm thinking it's a $30,000 rehab, right? Our contractor walks in there and and this has happened, by the way. I'm thinking it's a $30,000 rehab, and it happens with us all the time with our partners, right? Sometimes the partner thinks it's like X amount. A contractor walks in there and it's a $100,000 rehab.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? The deal's dead. I just saved myself a bunch of time. I know I got to go into renegotiation mode. I might have to go in the follow-up mode, but what I don't have to do is spend another 3 weeks getting the absolute perfect numbers with everything, wasting a bunch of people's time.
Because you're not going to get a bid from 100 to 30
You're
anyway.
not going to do that anyway.
Yeah.
No, you're not going to do that anyway. By the way, since we're talking about the rehab numbers, I think this is where most people get killed. I think this is where most people make a lot of mistakes. And they make it from a lot of different perspectives. Like, for instance, where I got really hurt is these contractors, they took advantage of me by, guess what? Lowballing numbers, right?
Oh, lowballing to get the job.
They lowball. So, you know, I have a contractor go in there, and I'm kind of thinking somebody would tell me $50,000, right?
Yeah.
So my contractor that ripped me off, his name was Tucker, he goes in there and he tells me $20,000. Well, guess what? At that point, I'm like, I don't need anybody else, right? Because I'm like, oh, I heard what I wanted to hear. He got me, you know, $20,000. I didn't get any more contractors to go in there. I got no more numbers. And when I actually did the deal and he spent $20,000, well, guess what happened then when $20,000 wasn't even enough to get half the job?
Yeah.
From that point on, everything was in a loss column. So be disciplined when you're getting your numbers. Just because you get a number that you want to hear, don't mean you stop.
Oh, and never tell them what number you need to be at before you get the bid.
Right.
Everybody does that, and I don't know why.
Well, again, let's face it, and you've been there.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
we're there with partners. You want to get a deal done.
Yep.
Right? You want to get a deal done. And how many times, based upon you wanting a deal done, you're right. You're spitting out numbers. You're telling where you got to be. And really, I hate to say this, but a lot of people in this business, whether you're a contractor, it could be whatever, they're looking for newbies, right? They're looking for newbies. And there's certain things newbies say, there's certain red flags newbies give off that basically, it's like it screams, you're going to get taken advantage of. You're going to get taken advantage of. So ARV, absolutely critical. Contracting, right? Get multiple, and verify your contractors. Spend some time with them. Right? Get some referrals. Find out what they're doing. I mean, these are all very important things. But there's other stuff, right? Like you got to get your title done. And like, here's one thing I learned. Not every single closing attorney or not every single title agent knows how to work with investors, right?
No.
It's not scary. It's just reality. Like people think, well, he's a closing attorney, so he can get everything done. Not necessarily. There's some people that just work closing attorneys that just work in a foreclosure world. They just, handle foreclosures. There's some that handle probates. There's some that handle just homeowner to homeowner. And there's some people that work with, our type of closings, investors. So I would suggest actually spending some time interviewing closing agents, interviewing title agents, interviewing closing attorneys, and find out, do they even work with investors, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I know we're talking about fix and flips, but the other thing is you don't want to get a bunch of suppliers based upon the kind of deal you're doing, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, and really, too, why do we spend money on a licensed home inspector every time? On most times.
Because the horror stories that we could tell on the deals we haven't. Look, here's what you're afraid of in this business. It's not the known, it's the unknown.
Yep.
Right? It's not the known, it's always the unknown. And the unknown is always buried. It's buried in the paperwork, it's buried in the details, and it's buried in the rehabs. Okay, it's buried in the rehabs. I'll give you a perfect example. So we're doing this deal with Patricia, right?
Yep.
In Florida, in Orlando. We had fairly new contractor. A new contractor to us, but not a new contractor to our agent there, Kim.
Yeah.
Right. So she recommended him very highly, but again, he was new to us, right? So we go in there, we do an inspection, right? Now, by the way, this was a $75,000 rehab. And I could tell you, with brand new partners, you know that we don't like to do $75,000 rehabs, right?
Yep.
But again, he comes very highly recommended. We love Kim. She's been with us for many, many years, our realtor. She said she's like...
And he was pretty impressive.
He was impressive. The
Yeah.
realtor vouched for him and all this. We get an inspection done, and I remember we're about 2 weeks away from closing, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm nervous because I know even after 2 decades, where you lose money is on the rehab side. So I'm like, Mary, let's do a conference call. Let's do a conference call with him, the contractor, and the inspector. So I still remember this conference call. Mm-hmm. We get on. Remember, where you lose money is in the unknowns in this business, right?
Yeah.
Unknowns. We got a good contractor. We got a good referral about him, but unknowns is what kill us. And so we're a couple weeks away from closing. We're on this conference call with the contractor and the rehabber, and I asked this question. I said, "What can go wrong?"
Yeah.
I said, "What can go wrong?" And the inspector. This is why you want to get these inspections done. The inspector told us. He said, "Let me tell you what can go wrong. None of us know what's behind those walls. None of us know what's behind those walls." And so because we could not afford to lose money on a deal, right? We couldn't afford to. We had great margins. So we knew we can go over, but we didn't want to go like anything crazy to happen. So on that particular deal, and this shows you how far you could push this, right? We're buying this from a homeowner. On that particular deal, I told the contractor, do you agree that if something goes wrong, it's going to go wrong behind the walls? He goes, Pete, if we're going to lose something on this deal, it's going to be behind the walls. I said, open the walls. He said, I can't open the walls. You don't own the house yet. And so I had our closer, Mary, call the seller and basically ask permission to open the walls. I made it very clear that if something goes wrong, I'll pay for it.
Yeah.
And we did. And now on that particular deal, they opened the walls and there was nothing wrong. But why do you pay for a licensed contractor? Why is it worth that? For stuff like this, because the contractor brought that up. No, I'm sorry, why do you pay for a licensed inspector? It's the licensed inspector that brought that up. Had we not gone through that exercise, okay, and had something been wrong, that could have thrown us for a really, really, really big loop. So there's times in this business where you try to save some money. There's times in this business where you try to save no money. Like, you don't want to try to start beating up your inspector. Like, well, it's $500. Well, can I get it for $400?
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It's like the kind of money that your inspectors will save you, absolutely critical. So the obvious question is this: at what point do you inspect the property? Like, I can't say we inspect every property in every single deal. So this this is kind of the rule of thumb I have. If we're going to put money into it from a rehab side, and it's more than paint and carpet, right? It's more than just go in there, a tenant move out, so we're going to just paint and carpet it, bring it up to shape. If it's more than that, we're going to get an inspector in there.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, WDO. A WDO. Why is checking for wood-destroying organisms so important?
Why don't you tell the story?
I don't want to tell this. I don't want to tell the story. Okay, I'll
She
tell
knows
the
the story I'm telling about.
So, we always, if we're going to buy, fix, and sell a house, you can ask a home inspector to do a WDO. They either are licensed to do that as well, or they'll bring a termite company out with them. So for the longest time, we weren't getting WDOs on properties.
Right.
We relied on just the actual home inspector to say whether or not something had termites or not. So we were doing a deal in Florida. Okay, quit laughing. And
I laugh so I don't cry.
And we didn't think there were any termites. Well, there was a 2-story house. So we start ripping up the floors upstairs, right? Because it had dogs and cats in there. So we were going to replace the subfloors. I kid you not, the entire second floor looked like Swiss cheese. There was no way under any circumstance that we could just cover it up. you just can't do that to people. You know, we couldn't sell a house and sleep at night with it looking like that. So we had to take the house off and replace the entire second floor, and lost a great deal of money on that, you know.
So just the cost on that, what was it, you know? Just the cost on that to fix that
130. I mean, it was like rebuilding a house. Plus, oh, by the way, we didn't even notice that until after we replaced the roof. So we put a new roof on and had to take the new roof off that we just put on because we had to replace the whole entire second floor. And there was no termite damage actually from the ground up on the first floor. I know it's crazy. So the inspectors, none of us saw any termites on that. So from now on, that's why we always pay a professional to give you a WDO. It could be termites, it could be black ants, it could be ambrosia beetles, it could be all sorts of things. So these are just some of the inspections that we get done when we're flipping a house. And it all boils down to just making sure you're making the right decision, right? And making sure you're flipping rich.